Hey everybody, welcome. I'm Adam. We're going to give just a couple more seconds to let folks rolling in. I know some folks are finishing their workday or finishing dinner, or you just got home, so want to make sure everybody can be here to get all the goodness. Welcome to onX Offroad 101. Master the app. Whether you're a new user or you just want to go deeper on onX, this is a great masterclass to help you really make sure you're getting value out of all those features and hopefully get out there in a cool place like in this photo. I personally love off-roading and dispersed camping. And so, yeah, there's nowhere I feel more alive and happy than when I'm out there on a trail or a camp. And so I hope maybe you're out there. Maybe you're going on a trip soon, but I hope what we share tonight helps you to get out there as well. If you're just joining, feel free to go ahead in the chat and say where you're joining from. And if you have a trip you're on or you're planning on going on, I always think it's cool that people in similar areas or that know an area sort of find each other and match up. And so feel free to go ahead and put that in the chat. All right, we're going to get going. I'm here. You're here. Let's do it. So I'm your host tonight. I'm Adam Zolak. On the internet, you might be able to find me as Bantha Overland. I travel around in this truck camper you can see here on my F350, and you can see my adventure partner there, Val, in the center. And I love nothing more than being in the middle of nowhere with some good company, friends new or old, and you can see some friends there, some truck campers I was traveling with. So I know everybody has a slightly different motivation, but I hope this helps you get out there into all those cool places in the world. And that's really the mission I'm on. I'm trying to inspire and enable more of you to get out there more often around the campfire, on the trail. You can find me at these various places on the internet, but we're here to talk about onX. So let's go ahead and get into it. So one thing tonight, before we get into all the details, we are going to be recording this session. And so feel free to follow along, get out your device and follow along. But if it's going a little bit too fast, I really want to share a lot of good stuff with you. And so if it feels too fast, the recording will be on YouTube probably by Monday at the latest. You can go on there, you can watch it at 2x, you can go back to the parts you missed. And if you really want to go through a particular section 2 or 3 times until you feel really comfortable with it, you can use that recording as well. Also, the chat, hopefully you've put your name, said where you're from, who's, where you're joining from, things like that. There's also a Q&A section. The Q&A section is staffed by some really smart onX Offroad's customer success folks tonight. And if you have a very specific question about onX features, content, your account, go ahead and put it in Q&A. We'll make sure it gets answered tonight or follow up if it's a longer term thing. And then feel free to chat away in the chat. I love reading the chat and seeing what's going on and what folks are finding helpful. So this is a photo I took I was exploring a new area in southwestern Wyoming, the Red Desert. If anyone's been there, say hi. It's a pretty remote place. I bet you not too many of you have been there, but maybe some of you, it's almost home. But I just like to share this, right? This is why I get out there. It's beautiful. It's cool. It can be desolate. I can find some peace from the modern hustle and bustle of life, right? And the thing that really helps me to fall in love with onX Offroad and the thing that keeps me coming back, there are 650,000 plus miles of off-road trails in the United States and Canada and Baja. And that is like more trails than I could ever explore in a lifetime, probably. And it's so exciting. But I hope part of what I show you tonight is how do you find the trail that's right for you, right? That there's the right level of challenge, or it's easy, or it's beautiful, or it's hard, right? Or it's near home, or it's far away, right? It's a lot of trails. And so I hope tonight you get some tips and thoughts and maybe even start thinking about a trip you want to take on a subsection of those trails. So tonight we're going to talk about 3 things. We're going to first talk about finding public lands and cool trails and camping for those of you that want to stay the night. Then we're going to get into planning. So we're going to talk about once we find that area and some trails we want to explore, how do we really dive in to figure out what waypoints do we want to visit? What routes do we maybe want to check out? How do we organize that into folders, use offline maps, share, check conditions and stuff like that? So we have a trip that is what we're looking for. And then finally go, right? Get out there, do the trail, do the thing. How do we navigate to the trailhead, on the trail, while driving, recording some tips and tricks. I'll show you my setup, how I use onX in my vehicle, all sorts of stuff like that. So let's go ahead and dive in. It's time to go into onX Offroad. So I'm going to start in the web-based version of onX. I just like having a big screen. I often have a laptop or a big monitor, but you can totally do this on your iPhone, your iPad, your Android phone, your Android tablet. I'll even show you some CarPlay and Android Auto things later. And so tonight I'll be showing you a lot of things on the web and some things that I think work better or like secret little tips for using it on your phone. But I just want to let you know if you're following along on your phone, that's awesome. Your tablet, web browser, whatever you want. And actually, I'll show you my phone real quick. Now, normally I tell people I'm just here north of Denver, but if I center this map, you'll actually see my blue dot is up here. And if I double tap to zoom in, you actually see I'm up here near Fort Collins. So if you are in this area, I'm actually hanging out at Overland Expo Mountain West. It's a gathering of 18,000 of my favorite friends doing education, vendors, just seeing people's rigs and people's gear and learning from each other and getting stoked about trips. So if you are in the area, consider stopping by. I'll be doing a really deep dive into onX on Sunday and doing a clinic. So if you're in the area, I hope to see you. All right. So we're going to get back to the map. So when you do load up onX, right, the first thing you're going to see is a map, right? And we get that. That's really what onX is about, helping us understand where we stand, where we're allowed to be, where we can play. So I just want to sort of make sure we're all on the same page. I just want to show you some things about the map that can be pretty useful. So one is, you can click and drag around. You can zoom in using the plus or zoom out using the minus. You can hit that little location icon to get your dot on the map. You saw that on my phone, right? And then as we start to zoom in, we'll notice that more detail becomes available, right? And there's different colors and there's different lines and things like that, right? So one of the first things that I love about onX is it shows me where there's public lands. And public lands, unless you're going to an off-road park or something specific like that, which are also on the map, right? Public lands are our playgrounds. And so I really love that I can come in here and I can see, oh, this is Arapahoe National Forest, right? Or I can come in here and I can see this is Bureau of Land Management, right? And so I just want to show you a couple different ways to figure out who owns this land on the map and whether it might be a playground for you, right? So if you're here on this map and you click on the green, it's going to tell you, oh, I think I clicked on a trail. If I click on the green, it's going to tell me it's Roosevelt National Forest. And so that's one of the ways that you can find out who owns a land or what an area is about. You can just click on it and it'll tell you who owns it. It'll tell you the ranger district. It'll tell you their phone number in case you want to call them up. I call rangers up all the time, ask them for tips, ask them for current conditions, right? You can come over here and say, well, what's this yellow land, right? You can click on it and you can find out. Oops, look at that. There's so many trails, I just keep clicking on them. You can find out it's BLM, right? And so it's a really cool way. You can click and find state forest, Rocky Mountain National Park. So you can look on the map, you can click on the map, and those are two ways I love to figure out what's going on. Now, one other thing that's really useful is if you come in here, down here on the lower left to my account and settings and click on legend, there's actually a key that'll show you what all this stuff means. So it'll tell you about trails, it'll tell you about land areas. And so just like I was saying, the green is Forest Service and yellow is BLM, you can come in here and find that information. And we're going to go through all this over the next couple of minutes. So don't worry, I'll talk about these trails and these points of interest. So now the big thing that we all have in common as off-roaders, right, is that we love to go off-road. And if you see these green trails and these blue trails and these black trails on the map, right, if anyone is a skier or a snowboarder, that's exactly what this is, but for off-road trails. Green are easier trails, right? Blue are moderate trails, black are harder trails. And we'll get into the details here in a second. You're probably like, well, how hard is a blue? How hard is a black? So you can come in here and see that. And then there's also some of these roads in here where it's just sort of like a beige road, I guess I would call it. And some of the beige roads are just trails that don't have that difficulty rating yet. Like here's a good example, right? If we come up here north of Rocky Mountain National Park, right, there's some trails, we can click on them. We can get more information. This is Pearl Beaver Road, right? It's a full width road. It's gravel surface. You must have a license plate, right? And I think these sometimes are the coolest trails. Like I definitely look at these trails and look for easy trails or medium trails because in my big truck camper, that's sort of where I'm at. But I love going on some of these trails where I'm not quite sure what's going to happen either. That's part of the adventure. So that can be super cool as well. So, you're probably starting to say, well, like, heck, Adam, there's a lot of trails on the map. How do I find trails I might be interested in? So I want to show you a couple different ways to do that. So one is that if you just wanted to find a trail, like if you wanted to find the White Rim, right? And you heard about this cool trail called the White Rim, you can just search for it. You can click on it. it'll take you to it. There's a cool trail in Utah. If you haven't done it, check it out. It's in Canyonlands National Park. It's a big route. It's 89 miles, right? You can come in here. You can see trail reports. So trail reports are onX users like you that come in here and submit the status and say, hey, I ran this in a Bronco. Most of the trail was pretty easy. Here's what was challenging to me. This person put some photos in. You can look at it and say, hey, I have a Colorado. I guess I could probably drive it, right? And so it's a really cool way to give back to the community. So I encourage you not to only read trail reports, but add them. So after you run a trail, please add a trail report. And then there's all this great information about this trail, right? There's its distance, its high point, its low point, its technical rating. It took this particular person 10 hours to run it. It looks like spring, summer, and fall. I recommend it. You can come in here and read the description, right? It looks like there is a limit and you might need to get a permit to camp. So there's all this really great information. And this information is added by what onX calls trail guides. And trail guides go out and put this information on the trail. And they just give you a little bit more information so you can decide if that trail is for you. The other thing trail guides do, which I find very helpful as a visual person, right, is they come in here and put photos. So you can sort of leaf through here and see the road conditions, see the scenery. And they also describe the difficulty rating. So for this one, you can read a little bit about why it's rated a 5 out of 10 for difficulty. And so all of that information just helps you to figure out, well, is a trail right for you? So if a friend says, hey, check out the White Rim Trail, like you can search for it, right? That's one way to find a trail. And I know for many of us, the way we like to find a trail is we just like to say, well, what's near us, right? And so I want to show you some trails up here to the west of Cheyenne, Wyoming, in a cool area called Hole Mountain. And I like to share it because it illustrates like a ton of different weird things in a forest, and I think you'll get the most out of it. So let's just for a moment say, you know, we were in Cheyenne and we're staring at this map, right? And we wanted to find some trails. Well, one of the things we can do is we can just tap Discover. And what Discover does is it shows us the trails that are nearest to where the map is centered, which may be your current location or where you have the map panned, right? And so we can come on here and we can find the Buford Trail. I'm gonna zoom out here a little bit. The Buford Trail, the FS 708 Trail, the Voodoo Trail, and actually watch these little trails over here as I hover over it. You'll actually see them light up. So you also start to get a sense of like, oh, interesting, there's a trail there, right? So that's another way to find trails. Another way I like to find trails too is like if an area just looks cool, I might just come in and check out the trails in an area and sort of put a trip together. So just like we can click on the map and figure out who owns the land, right? In this case, it's going to be Medicine Bow Route National Forest. Forgive me, being in an event with 18,000 people eats up the Wi-Fi. All right, so this is Medicine Bow Route National Forest, but you can also click on any of these trails, right? So a lot of times I'll just sort of go through these trails. I'll look at some of the photos. I'll read the description, right? I'll come in here, start to look at this. Looks real easy. It's real chill, right? There's some grassy meadows. If I'm interested in camping, there's a photo of someone camping. So that's a sign. Someone even took a picture of this map. So that's another way to just sort of explore the map and figure out trails that might be of interest to you. Now, you know, before, as I said, sort of find, plan, go, like this is finding, right? And so a couple other things I like to do, you know, I like to figure out one, is there the right level of challenge? So if I want the green and blue trails, this is a great area for me. You know, you might really want to do hard stuff. And so I'm going to zoom out here to sort of give you a better example. If I have this big map and I'm looking at Western Colorado, I can also filter this map for the right level of challenge and the type of vehicle I have. So I'm going to hit filter. Now I can come in here. I happen to have a full width high clearance vehicle. So I'm going to select that. And as I select these, watch the lines. You see how the lines sort of come in and disappear based on what I'm picking. And I like easy and moderate trails, right? So that green and that blue. Now, if I wanted extreme, and I also had a, you know, different shaped or sized vehicle, right? I could filter these till I could figure out what these trails were. So you can see there's a few red in here, right? There's a lot more difficult. So you can see these blacks, and I could say, okay, well, I have to be full width, right? I have to have high clearance. And now we can come in here and say, oh, cool, there's this trail up here, this Bald Mountain Trail that's black, right? It's hard. It's 7 out of 10. Like maybe this is my type of adventure, right? So I often do use these filters to sort of find trails that are the right level of challenge and difficulty for me. Now, one other tip I want to give you if you're just sort of, browsing the map, or you're, finding these trails and you're trying to interpret it. If we go back to that legend, again, I'm going to go in the lower left, go here, go to legend. So here's a reminder if you're ever trying to remember, hey, what was green, what was blue, easy, moderate, difficult, red is extreme. And then those beige kind of trails are, we just don't know, right? Go out there, have your adventure. It could be the coolest trail because we actually don't know if it's easy or hard. And then you can look at the lines too. So a full width road is going to sort of have this double line. So Caretakers here is a good example of this full width road. And then a high clearance trail is going to have this dash line. So Crow Springs Road here is an example of a high clearance trail. And if we go into Crow Springs Road and look at some of the photos, you'll actually see it is a little bit more difficult, right? There's a little bit of off camber. There's some rocks depending on the line you pick, right? There's some ruts. Looks like there's a little bit of a mud hole here, right? And so those are some of the things that are going to get it that difficulty rating. And in addition to reading what the trail guy wrote, you can actually click on the difficulty reading and rating and read what a 3 is. So if you're like, what is a 1? What is a 2? What is a 3, right? So if you're curious, should I do a 6? Well, obstacles up to 3 feet. Can your vehicle do that? Is that fun for you? Right? Maybe you're more of a 3 or a 4 or something like that, right? So those are some different ways to find trails. Now, once I found an area that sort of looks cool, or I'm like, oh, these trails are near me, I want to check them out, right? I also just like to know what else is going on in that area. And so I want to show you how to do that. And so one of the things I'll often do is I'll just sort of start zooming in on the map and checking out what else is here. So right now, we're looking at the topo layer. If we went over here to this little thing with the 3 squares, this is the layer selector. And if we open it up, we'll notice that topo is on, and I'm going to turn HD topo on, and you'll actually see, check this out. It's so cool. So you really get to, really get to see the terrain. So I like going to places with like rocks and views and vistas and stuff like that, right? So I like some elevation change. And so the topo map can be a great way to see that. So when I zoom in here, I start to see, look at all this elevation change. It looks like there's a rock area here, right? It looks like there's a trailhead. Looks like there's another trailhead, a campground if you don't want to disperse camp, right? A picnic area. And then we start to see some trails, Turtle Rock Loop Trail, Devil's Playground Trail. Devil's Playground, always a good sign of fun. Right? We see little streams, maybe some little lakes or watersheds. And so I just love to find interesting areas like this because sometimes I want to paddle or I want to hike, right? And so seeing what I can do in addition to just off-roading sometimes is really cool. So I'm starting to like this area. It looks cool, right? There's cool trails, it's public land. I like some of the topography. Now I want to switch layers here to satellite because I think it really starts to give you a sense of what's going on for real, right? So I'm gonna zoom in here and you can see these really cool rocks. Look at this, right? And I'm actually gonna put the topo lines back on. So I'm gonna go to hybrid. So it's gonna add those contour lines of elevation change back. So you can see that. And then the coolest thing, this is my favorite. If you want to go beyond this and you really want to see it, you hit this 2D button and you're going to go into 3D mode, right? And then check that out, right? You can look all around. You can see what the view is going to be. Let me turn these topo lines back off by going to satellite. And so if we're like, hey, we're going to drive on this Voodoo road, this green guided trail, what are we going to see? I mean, this is what you're going to see, right? And it looks pretty darn cool if you're into elevation change and rocks and hikes and cool places, right? And so those are often some of the things I do to find an area and say, hey, that looks like a cool playground. Now, I know that's been a lot, and I showed it to you in my web browser. I actually want to switch here to my phone, and I want to show you how you can do the same thing on your mobile device and how I actually think it's almost easier and better to do some of this stuff on your phone. So I'm going to come back in here to Pole Mountain. I'm going to turn some of these layers off. I'll show you these in a second. So this is that Pole Mountain area, right? And if we come in here, we see the same thing. We see the campground. We see the elevation change. We can come in here and turn on the satellite layer, right? And we can go into 3D. Now, a couple cool things about mobile. Now, you saw this at the beginning of the class. If you want to zoom in, you can just double tap. That's pretty cool. And if you want to zoom out, you can just take 2 fingers and tap once. So that's one thing I find super cool on mobile. The other thing I think is super cool is that, if you're in 3D and you want to sort of change the angle, you can just use these 2 fingers and you can get like right in there, right? And then you can take 2 fingers and you can rotate it, right? So you can say, hey, what does it look like from this side? And so I just think it's a super cool area. And this is a super cool feature that really lets me understand, hey, if I'm driving down this Vudu trail, what am I going to see? And I often do this. I actually just sort of drive, right? I'm like, driving down the road, right? What am I going to see? What am I going to see out the driver window, right? And I get down in there and I change the pitch there a little bit, and you can literally sort of drive the road, right? And you can see different things. Like you can see, it looks like that might have been a dispersed campsite, right? And you can see that might have been a dispersed campsite and things like that. So cool feature. Now, if you are all turned around now and you're like, which way's up? You can see here there's a compass and north is pointing to my left. If you just tap that compass once, it'll go straight back up. You can hit 3D and that'll go back to 2D, and we can even go back to Topo. And so, depending on what I'm doing in a map, I sometimes want to simplify it. So I consider Topo to be a more simplified map. Or sometimes I want the satellite on or the contours lines on or 3D. It really just depends what I'm doing. So at this point, I'm pretty jazzed about this area. I think it'd be a fun place to off-road. And so at this point, I want to go from finding a cool place to planning a trip. And so I want to get into some of those details that I would show you for that. Before I do that, though, I want to show you how I actually use this map in my vehicle. So right now I've been showing you, well, what would it look like if I was sitting at home or sitting in a chair at camp, looking at the map for a cool place to go. I want to show you how I actually have this set up in my vehicle, because I think it's a little bit different when you're out there driving on the trail, and that's important too.
When I'm using onX Offroad in my vehicle, I like to have my phone up, and I like to have it up on CarPlay or Android Auto if you use Android. I use my phone for a general overview, so you can see I can zoom out very, very wide here and get a general sense of where I am and different points of interest that I might be trying to navigate to. And then I use the head unit here to navigate more specifically and close up. So if I'm looking for a turnoff, a trail, a dispersed campsite, something like that. And something else I like to do is have the satellite with topo map up. So in your base maps, there's the hybrid, and this basically is your satellite with topo. And now you can see it's displayed here on my head unit. Now what I like about this is I can see what's around me. I can see there's trees here, there's a hill here, I can see the contour lines, and I can actually see there's a pull-off up here. So if I was looking for a place to stop or turn around, or maybe check out a dispersed campsite, it can be super helpful to find interesting things that might not be super visible from the road. So you can see here as we drive by that this is indeed a little pull-off, and in a pinch you could use it as a dispersed campsite or something like that. So it can be a super helpful way to just get a sense of what's around you, because sometimes you're just in the trees or you're next to rocks and it can be hard to see what's going on. One other tip, you might want to orient your map in different ways. So right now it's oriented in my direction of travel. If I tap this icon again, I'll get top down. If I tap it once more, I'm going to get north up. And so you can cycle through those three views. So I'm going to show you how this sort of works. So I'm going to drive here, and as I go around this curve, you'll see the map rotates around the direction in which I'm traveling. If I tap it again and get that top-down view, it's going to do a similar thing. It's going to be my direction of travel, but it's going to just be sort of straight down like that. And then I can also tap this if I want to zoom in and zoom out a little bit, see a little bit more terrain. And then I can also tap it once more and get that north up, and tap it once more and get that perspective. And I like this one. This is the one I use the most. It's sort of like a tilt, so I can sort of see the geometry of the terrain a little bit better. I can see if it's going up or down or what's around me. I can see what's ahead a little bit, but the map is always oriented so that I get a preview of what I'm about to see in the next mile of road or so.
All right, so hopefully that helps you at least understand the setup I use. There's no perfect setup, so like you can do your own thing, but I like having that one map that's sort of zoomed out for context, that one that's really zoomed in for navigation. And you can see there's some subtlety and preference to, how do you want the map oriented and which base layer do you want to have up? It really depends on what you're doing and what your preference is, but definitely some options. Play around with it, figure out what you like the best. All right. So as we really get into plan, when I think about planning, I'm really trying to make sure this is going to work out, right? And so I don't know about you, but one thing that often can hamper my travels in the spring or the fall or definitely the winter is snow. And so often one of the first things I do when I'm planning is I actually want to figure out, well, like, what's the snow situation? And so there's a really cool feature in onX Offroad. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's a layer called Recent Imagery. And if you switch to this, it looks pretty similar to what we were just looking at, but we have this date picker. And we can go back a couple weeks, or we could go way back and we could say, hey, you know what? I think I'm actually thinking about taking a trip before Thanksgiving, and we can see what it looked like during that period, right? And if we come in here, we actually see this area has some snow, right? And as we go through those weeks, it sort of melts a little bit, then it comes back pretty hard in January, right? And so I love using recent imagery for things like snow, or if I'm looking at the water level of a lake or something like that. It can just be a really useful way to figure out not exactly what it's going to be like because conditions vary from year to year, but knowing if snow is going to be a factor and it's something you have to pay a little bit more attention to. Or if you want to go snow wheeling, like some of us like to do, it can be a great way to find those winter playgrounds where we want to go drive in the snow. Okay, so I'm going to turn this off. I'm going to go back to Topo here. So, often for me, the other thing I love to look for is cool dispersed camping, right? And so, often I'll come in this map and I'll mark some trails and I'll say, hey, you know what? I looked at this Crow Springs road. I really want to run it. I want to remember it, right? So I might just drop a waypoint. So I'll show you how to do that. So there's all these tools in the upper right. We can make a route. We can do some other things. We can add a waypoint. I'm going to add a waypoint and I'm going to get this little black pin right here and I can drag it to wherever I want. And I'll often just drag it to the start of a trail and say, Crow Spring Road, right? And I'll pick an icon that I think is appropriate. In this case, 4x4 is a good one. Now, I always use pink for things I haven't done. I use this sort of teal for things I have done. And as I'll show you in a minute, I use yellow for all dispersed campsites. I just like to do this so when I scan the map, I sort of know pink I haven't done, blue I've done, yellow is camping. You don't have to do what I do, but I would suggest you come up with your own sort of scheme as to how you use the colors. I think it can just help keep things organized. And then I often put things in a folder, and I'll show you more about this as the night goes on, but it just helps me keep things organized and it makes it easier to share stuff and hide stuff and things like that. So I'm going to make a folder. I often name it the year and the month and then where I'm going. So I'll name it 2025-08 Pole Mountain, and I'll go ahead and hit save, right? And so now I have, whoops, there we go. Now I have this waypoint saved here. It's in this folder, right? And I'll do this for a couple of the trails I might want to check out. But, I guess the big question sort of becomes for me, like, where am I going to camp? Because I love dispersed camping. And so one of the coolest things onX has done this year is add the dispersed camping layer. If you know anything about camping on U.S. Forest Service land, you can disperse camp in some places, you can in other places, and it can be really confusing to find that information. And so one of the cool new layers that onX added is the dispersed camping layer. And I'm going to go ahead and turn this on. And as I turn this on, you'll see what happens, right? A lot of these roads got a yellow highlight, right? And so I'm going to turn that on, off. And so if we come in here and we look at the detail, it sort of explains it, but I'll explain it to you right now. Basically, if it's highlighted on the left side of the road, that means that you can follow this guidance. You can disperse camp within 100 feet of that side of the road. And if it's on the right side of the road, same thing. And the way dispersed camping works in forest is you look for an established site, a site that's already been used in the past. Maybe it's a fire ring. It definitely has a place where a vehicle's been parked and you can camp there. And so one of the things that I use onX for, in addition to figuring out where I can legally camp so I can have a confident night's sleep knowing I'm allowed to be there, is finding where sites might be. And so if you're in an area like Pole Mountain, I'm going to switch to satellite here, where it's not super dense forest, you can actually come down these roads and you can see where people might have dispersed camped in the past. And so if we zoom in here, you'll start to see there's a little spur here, right? There's a little spur here, right? As I come down this road, Let me just come around the bend here a little bit more. Right, you can find different places where you might be able to camp. And so on the southern portion of this road, there's quite a few of these places, right? You can see there's a trail coming back off here and back off here and back down here and across here. And so these are all little spurs. And indeed, look, there's actually a little camper here, right? And so that's a pretty clear sign someone's camping there. So often when I find potential sites that I'm like, hey, that might be a cool site, I'll also add a waypoint. And so I'm going to drop a waypoint here. Now for this one, I use the dispersed camping icon. And I use that yellow color. And again, it's just so I can quickly look at the map and know what's going on. I can use the tent to see it's a dispersed campsite. I can use yellow to know it's about camping. I'll put it in my folder. I'll save that, right? And I'll just do this a couple times. And I'm not trying to necessarily mark every single campsite. What I am trying to do is mark some of the cool ones or just know that there are some in this area and I might find different ones on the ground. But, if you've ever been out there, right, sometimes like you go to a site and what happens, right? Someone's in it. That's how dispersed campsites work. You can't reserve them. Sometimes there's 52 cows standing in a muddy puddle and you don't want to sleep there, right? Sometimes the sites are around a corner and you can't see them. And so one of the things I love doing in onX is scouting some of those sites ahead of time so I can explore them on the ground and make that final decision. And so often I'll do that with the satellite mode turned on, the dispersed camping layer turned on. I'll go into 3D. And again, I'll almost drive the road, right? And I'll just come down here and say, are there any cool spots, right? And so like, here's a perfect example. There's a potentially cool spot back here for a vehicle or two. It's behind these rocks and excuse me, you can't see it from the road, right? You may totally miss it, right? So these are the kind of things I love to mark so that I can explore them when I'm on the ground because I may be looking at something really cool to the right. I may totally miss this site to my left, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and mark that. I'm gonna put it in my folder, right? And I sort of just do this until I feel like I found a couple good options. And I look around for that. It's like Mount Doom. So cool. Like, till I find that, right? Like, that's the spot, right? If I could have that spot, that's a pretty cool spot, right? So I'm definitely going to mark that. And I do this super weird thing. I don't know why I chose the sheriff badge, but I mark the sites I think that are the best sites with the sheriff badge. So that's a sheriff site. Potentially, I'll check it out on the ground. We'll make it yellow. We'll put it in the folder too. All right, so I think we found enough sites. Now, one thing I do want to show you real quick, I want to show you what this looks like if you're using onX on your phone. And I just say that because it can almost be even easier to do this on your phone. So let me pull up my phone here again. So one of the cool things is if you find a site on your phone and you want to mark a waypoint, you can actually come in here. Let's find a real site. And you can just long press your finger. So I'll just show you this. I'm just gonna let my finger rest there on my screen. And it says, do you want to add a waypoint or build a route? I'll show you that again. Whoop. So I'll hold my finger there, add a waypoint. And so it's almost easier, right? I can just hold my finger down, pick the color, add it to the folder. Boom. There you go, right? And so that's often, a way I use to do it on my phone. So do it on web, do it on your phone, do it however you want. Okay, so we've got a couple campsites marked. We're starting to make a plan, right? We're saying we can camp here, we can drive here, we want to camp here, we want to drive here. We're starting to get excited about this area. It's on public land. I'll show you a couple other things I check just to make sure it's a good plan. So one, I'm going to come in here and turn the private land layer on. And you'll see these red boxes come in the side. And let me switch this back to Topo just to simplify the map a little bit. So you'll start to see names, and these are the people that own the land. Same thing over here. Now, this can be really important if a forest has inholdings, like little pockets of land within the forest. This parcel is pretty good about it. But if you come in here, right, and you just click on a square, right, it'll tell you who owns it. This is owned by the Mountain Land and Cattle Company. It'll give you their address. It'll tell you how many acres it is. Also shows it on the map. So one thing that's really helpful for is, you definitely don't want to camp there and you don't want to drive there unless onX has marked it as a right of way, right? So here we can see this is a beige trail. You're allowed to drive on it. And then it transitions to this road, which probably means it's private and you're not allowed to be there, right? So checking for things like that for private land can be super helpful. Another thing I like to check in the spirit of making a good plan. Let me just turn that off, So I'll often look at the cell coverage. So maybe you're going for a long weekend and you're trying to take a couple meetings on Friday or something, right? You can turn on your cell phone provider, like let's say you have AT&T, and you can come in here and you can see, oh, this area probably has 5G coverage, right? And as we zoom out, we'll see different areas that have better or worse coverage. So if we were getting really excited about the eastern portion of this Pole Mountain area on Crow Spring Road, as we zoom in, right, like there's a little bit spottier coverage. It might not be as guaranteed. So something you may want to vary your plans on, depending if you want to be online or you want to be offline. Different people like either. Um, and then another thing I look at a lot is active wildfire, wildfire smoke, and historical wildfire. So, one, if there's an active wildfire, I might not want to be in super dense smoke. I might also not want to be near the fire because of risk to me. And I might also not want to get in the way of first responders or people that are evacuating or things like that. So, right now, you can see real time Pole Mountain looking pretty good. Probably a good place to go. But if we zoom out a little bit, we'll start to see a slightly different story. Sadly, it's summer, right? So there's some fires going on. And so let's see. Yeah, so we can see here the Lee fire that's been impacting Colorado a little bit, cooling down a little bit, but you can see some things like here's the fire perimeter for the fire. This is that red area. This area here is the smoke density, so really thick smoke in this particular area. And sometimes these are huge plumes going across the country, as you know, I'm sure. And then these little dots are satellite detected hotspots. And so it's a super cool feature. This fire boundary, shows where the fire has been or maybe. This is actually showing where the hotspots are, right? And so these two things together paint a much more realistic picture to me of the fire. So I'm gonna zoom out here a little bit, and you can see, there's fires, many little fires, many bigger fires. You can see how some of them are a little bit bigger, just to help you figure out which ones you may need to pay attention to. Certainly, check information for your particular area. But one thing that's super cool too is these historical wildfire burn areas. So if you come in here, you can see this Cameron Peak fire from 2020. This is the Alexander Mountain Fire from 2024. So again, the darker, the redder the color, the more recent it's been. If it's yellow, it's a little bit older. But you may just want to double check these areas. Not all forest fires destroy the forest or make it a place you wouldn't want to go, but some do, right? And so coming in here and zooming in to the point at which, you're really in there, and then switching to satellite, right? Can be a really helpful way to say, I definitely see where this area was burned, right? It looks like there's some ground cover coming back. Looks like there's some stands intact here and there, but really it starts to give you a sense of like, do you want to be there, right? Like maybe that's just an area that's not your cup of tea. So I always check that before a trip too. And I also check it when I'm planning, but I also check it just before I go. So that's one thing as we sort of get into going on our trip, which we're going to do here in a second. A lot of these layers are things that I check when I'm planning, but if the trip isn't for a month or two, I'll come back in and I'll still check things like, I'll check precipitation, temperature, air quality for wildfires, things like that, a little bit more real time before the trip in case anything changed, and I'll adjust the trip if I need to. I know none of us want to adjust our plans, but sometimes that's the way it goes, right? There's a fire and it's just not going to be fun, or it's going to be super cold and it's not going to be fun. So all right, so we've looked at a bunch of things we can look at to figure out how to make a good plan, marking waypoints, finding dispersed campsites, using the dispersed camping layer, and using some of those other layers like the cell layer and the fire layer and things like that. One last thing I want to show you about planning is making a route. Let me turn these fire layers off. So, often after you stare at a map for a little bit, you start to say, hey, I think I want to do it like this, right? I'm going to come up from Denver. I'm going to come over here. I want to run these trails, right? Well, how do you actually figure out that route, what it looks like, and share that with other people, or even remind yourself of what that route is? So there's a route builder tool. You can click it right here. And I'm going to start just north of Denver. I sort of know this area pretty well. I don't necessarily need detailed directions. I'm going to come up here to Cheyenne, and then I'm going to come over to Pole Mountain. You can see that it's just sort of snapping to the road, right? Now, I like to get off the pavement when I can. So actually, after Cheyenne, I think I'm going to come up here on this, what is probably a county road. Yep, 210. And I'm going to come into Pole Mountain here, and I'm going to come in here, And I'm just clicking in various spots to say, hey, snap it to this particular area. Now you can also point draw, like you can just draw a straight line. It's helpful in very specific situations or if a trail is not snapping, but in general, I just use snap to. So I'm going to undo that. Go back to snap to. So I was interested in this Crow Springs Road, right? It had all these cool dispersed campsites. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to make a little loop. So you can see there, I'm going to add another dot, right? And then this Voodoo area looks super cool with these rocks. So I'm come down here. And then maybe I want to try this Twin Mountain Road. Like maybe I checked it out and it looks like the right level of difficulty. It's high clearance. I can challenge myself a little bit, right? And you can start to build this route, right? So I would name this Pole Mountain Route. I might name it day one if I was doing a multi-day trip. And you can start to see stuff like what's the elevation change, right? It's going to be a heck of a lot higher than it is in Denver, which, yay, it's like August, right? It's super hot. So it might be a nice opportunity to cool off. Show you the distance, elevation gain, again, color. I often use that pink. I often use a little bit of a smaller line weight with a dash. It just helps me to see the underlying trail a little bit. And then you can go ahead and add it to a folder again, Pole Mountain. So that's generally the things I do when I'm making that plan. I add those points of interest. I make a route. I check the layers. I check the information. Make sure I think I sort of know what I'm getting into, and I leave some of it up for the adventure of being there and driving the trail and visiting camp. Right. Okay. So now we're going to get into Go a little bit. So probably the most important thing you can do, and you don't want to forget this. So I always like to extra emphasize it, right? To have all this goodness when you're out there, potentially with no connectivity, right? You need to make an offline map for the area or areas you're going to visit. So I'm going to show you how to do that here on web. I'm also going to show you how to do it on your phone because you can do it in either place. And an offline map is basically, it's just making sure that you have all of this information. You have the topo layer, right? You have the satellite layer, right? You have all of these trails that you can drive off-road on. You have all of these waypoints that you added for your campsites. You have your route. Just make sure you have all of it offline. So if you don't have a connection, you're still good to go. So I'm going to switch back here to Topo. Now on the left here, there's offline maps. I have no offline maps right now. I'm going to make a new one. And I'm gonna get this box. And it's as simple as putting the area you want to visit in the box and picking the satellite imagery you need. You're always going to get the topo. You're always going to get the routes. You're always going to get your points of interest for your dispersed campsites and your trails, right? The thing you need to pick is the satellite imagery. And basically you're just picking, is it really high resolution? Is it low or is it medium? And if you're like, well, what the heck do I need? I normally pick medium. It's good enough to scout for dispersed campsites if I'm having trouble finding one or seeing a trail or seeing, some level of detail. But you may have a particular use case where like you really need to go high for some reason. Go for it. Most of my trips, medium's pretty good. So I'm going to name this again, Pole Mountain. Hit save. And it's going to give me this warning and say, offline maps don't download on my computer. You have to do it on your phone. So we're going to go over to my phone and I'm going to show you why that is. Okay, so we're back here on my phone. I'm going to come over here to offline maps. So you can see Pole Mountain. You can see this little down arrow. That means it's not downloaded. Something else you can do to check here. I'll just zoom out here to show you this. Now you see this box here? This box is sort of red and white. Red's bad, right? So let me show you what it looks like when you download your map. I'm just going to tap this arrow right here. You can see it's downloading, right? Here we go. Right. And so it's going to turn green, and green means good, right? So if you have an offline map, make sure it has a green box, make sure it has a green check, lots of green, not red, and you're good to go. And do this at home, right? When you have a good broadband connection or when you're connected to Wi-Fi or if you have Starlink or something like that. If you ever do need to make an offline map on your phone, it's very similar. You say make an offline map, you put it in the box, you pick the size, you hit save, it downloads it, you're good to go. You get a green box again, right? So that's probably the most important thing to think about when you're going out there. I want to show you a couple other things that are really helpful for me. One of them is navigation. And so navigation lets me get directions from my door on all the pavement. And then it also navigates me on the dirt trail. And so I think that's super cool because a lot of us had in the past had to use navigation apps where, we would navigate in one map app till we got to the trailhead, and then we'd switch to a different map app to navigate on the dirt. right? And one worked better for one and one worked better for the other. And so I'm really excited. I'm gonna show you a little demo I recorded because again, it's hard to show you sitting here in a room of what navigation is like. And it's really cool to be able to navigate pavement and dirt together. So one of the cool things you can do in the app is if you know where you want to start your trip, you can pull up that waypoint or route and you can hit navigate. And in the past, you've been able to navigate using Apple Maps or Google Maps, but there's a new option for onX navigation. And if you select that, it'll give you turn-by-turn directions, on-road and off-road, which is really cool because a lot of mapping services do not work very well when you get off-road as well. And so if I wanted to go ahead and follow this route, I'd hit go.
Head north on Harlan Way, then turn right onto West 76th Avenue.
And so you can hear the prompts. And so you can zoom in, you can zoom out. If you pop this up, you can look at the detailed directions if you need to see that. And then you can also preview the route. And then you can always also sort of switch between your heads up, zoomed in view and the total route view like this. And then you can also switch your orientation. So if you want your direction facing north versus north facing north, you can do that. You can toggle the sound on and off. And so you get your written instruction and you get your audio instruction. And so if you just have a phone, you can go ahead and use your phone. It also works in landscape, which is nice. I happen to have CarPlay, and so I'm going to go ahead and show you what that looks like here on CarPlay, and I'll drive around a little bit so we can see this in action.
In less than half a mile, turn right onto Sheridan Boulevard.
And one thing I like to do sometimes too, like if I'm passing a trailhead or a campsite I might want to check out later, I'll use this mark button, and you can use it to either start recording a track or mark my location. So I'm going to mark my location, and you'll see it drops a waypoint right there, and it just makes it really easy for me to go back later in the app, and I can update it and say it was a campsite or whatever. But a lot of times that's how I mark my campsites, because I just find cool campsites as I drive by it, or maybe a trailhead I want to visit the next day.
Onto West 74th Place, then turn left onto Kendall Street. Turn left onto Kendall.
Yeah, so as you can see, it's a very familiar experience, but I think the cool part is it works really well on dirt too. One of those clips was from Death Valley National Park, and at first I sort of thought like, what the heck do I need this for? But sometimes you're in a really confusing road network, right, where there's a ton of trails, and it's sort of confusing which way you go at the junction, and things like that. And so I really appreciate navigation, and also check out that tip to drop a waypoint along the way. It's a great way. If you see something you want to go back to the next day, or maybe a campsite that's a backup, you can just easily drop a pin while you're driving, and then you have it in onX if you need it in the future. Okay, so navigation is a big part of going. One thing I want to mention for some of you that may be important to going too, there is this Elite Pro Deals section. And so one of the cool things you get with an onX Elite membership is access to discounts and over 40 partner deals for some really big brands that you probably use. I know I use ARB, Battleborn, and many of these, Factor 55. So check that out. So I know some of you are new here and you're just checking onX out. So when we looked at the recent imagery, when we looked at the private land, and when we look at these elite memberships, this is what is in the onX Elite membership. And I think right now, for a little bit longer, there is a 50% off Labor Day sale. So we can put that information in the chat. But I think that's a pretty cool opportunity if perhaps you or your friend or someone still needs to get a subscription and you're still checking onX out. So think about that. The last big thing with going is record and go. So many of you may like to record your tracks, know where you drive. I like to do it for both the memories, but also it can be really useful because sometimes I need to backtrack. Like sometimes I'm 50 miles into a dirt road network and there's a big mud pit or something I just can't get out of and I get stuck in. I need to turn around or something like that. And so I just want to show you how you can use Go and Track to record your track. And it's also a great way to look at that again in the future or share it with a friend or something like that. So again, I have a quick little video to show you of how Go and Track works.
When you're out there in the trail, I highly suggest recording where you've been. It can be super helpful if you want to revisit a place, share it with a friend, who's looking for a recommendation or just figure out where the heck you came from in case you need to backtrack. It can be especially helpful in situations where there's a lot of trails and you can get lost. So you can see here on my phone, I can hit go and track, and I can hit record track. Now I'm actually going to show you how I can do this here on my CarPlay head unit, but let me show you how this works first here. So we hit record and track, and then we start driving. And you'll see as I drive, it'll start recording where I'm going with these little red dots here. It'll show me the time, the duration, the distance, the elevation as it changes. And I can always pause this or stop this if I need to. So I'm gonna stop here and I'm gonna go ahead and pause this. And I just hit end. And so when you do that, you can give it a name and then you can resume it if it was a mistake, look at your stats or save it. If you want to do the same thing here on CarPlay, you can hit this icon in the lower right. And this is where you can drop a pin, like a cool campsite or a place you want to go visit later. Or you can hit start tracking. And if you hit start tracking, the same thing will happen. It'll start tracking here, it'll start tracking here. And as we drive, you'll start to see those red dots again. So super handy for a variety of reasons, and I highly suggest you go and track when you're out there on the trail.
Yeah, so I use Go and Track almost all the time when I'm driving off trail. It's helpful and it's cool to see all the places I've been. All right, so those are the things for going, right? Double checking those layers, making sure you have your offline map created and also download it on your mobile device. And if you're traveling with a buddy, right? Like I know when I travel with Val, I'll often say, hey, download the maps on your device. I created them. So I'll download the offline maps on my device. She'll download them on her device. And we'll sort of have a backup copy of the maps in case something happened to one of our phones. So we looked at that, we looked at navigation, and then we also looked at Go and Track. So we're getting towards the end. I know that was a lot, so feel free to go back and watch that recording when it gets posted on YouTube. We also have advanced master classes almost every month where we get really deep into a particular topic. Last month, we went really deep into every single layer in onX Offroad, and that recording's on YouTube. So if that's something you want to check out or you want to check out the other advanced master classes, check out YouTube's for the ones we've already done, and check out the masterclass website for upcoming master classes. We're also going to share a really good blog post with you about dispersed camping. If you've never done motorized dispersed camping before and you're new to it, there's a great blog post getting into all the details to really help you understand the rules and the regulations and really get out there on your first camping trip or go further to a more remote destination. So we'll share that resource with you as well. I hope all of this has been super helpful. I am going to pause here and ask our moderator here, Melissa, if there's anything we should dive into a little bit more before we wrap it up.
Hey, Adam, great class tonight. Everyone in the chat has really enjoyed the information that you've been handing out. Earlier in the class, though, when you switched your map into 3D mode, there were some folks who wanted to know, could you do that again? They weren't really clear on where you're switching to 3D mode, so maybe if we could end the class with showcasing that 3D one more time.
Yeah, let's do it. It's probably my favorite thing, so I'd love to do that. So let me show you on web, and then I'll show you on the mobile device too. And then depending on what you're using, you can do it. So first, I'm just gonna like zoom into the area I want to see. I'll just use the plus here. So I'm gonna zoom into this Turtle Rock area. So you can see this 2D control here. As you click this in the lower right, it's just gonna switch between 2D and 3D. So you can see if it says 2D and I click it, it's going to switch to 3D. If it says 3D and I click it, it's going to go to 2D, right? And then this can be a little tricky. So on a laptop like mine, I have a trackpad. I actually hold down the control key as I use the trackpad. So that's how I'm rotating, and that's how I'm going up and down. And then I'm pinching and zooming on my trackpad. So you can't quite see this. So I'll show you on the phone. It's a little bit more intuitive on the phone, but that's how I do it here on web. And if you want that satellite imagery, you can come to the three squares, the layer selector, select satellite, and that's how you get that too. And then once you're in there, you can left and right, up and down, right? And then here on my phone, it's the same area. So we're already in satellite here. So I'm gonna come in here, zoom into this Turtle Rock area. And again, if you were in Topo, you could pick the layers and switch from Topo to satellite. And then same thing, there's that 2D toggle. So when it says 2D and you tap it, it's going to switch to 3D. When it says 3D and you tap it, it's going to switch to 2D. And then once you're in 3D, everything happens with your fingers. So you can use your fingers to pinch and zoom, or you can double tap to go in, right? And then you can rotate to turn, like almost like you're rotating a circle or a clock or a dial or something. And then you can take two fingers to go up and down. So if we wanted to get really into this area labeled picnic area, we could zoom in, we could tilt down, and then we could turn it a little bit. Man, I want to have a picnic there. So that's how 3D works. And it's a super useful tool for really understanding what you're about to get yourself into, finding some really cool trails to drive on and really cool places to camp. All right. So I know there was a lot. Thank you so much for hanging in there. I know we took up almost the full hour, but there's so much to share. And I really hope that that helps you get out there on an awesome adventure. So until next time, I'm Adam, and I really do hope to see you out there on the trail and hopefully at an advanced masterclass as well. Bye.